Okay, let's start it continue from last time. We finished book. We finished on book 17 and chapter 21. And today we are going to start from book 17, chapter 22. Okay, so anyone want to read your translation before we share our own translation?
If you do, just raise your hand or type an exclamation point in the chat.
Brian, want to read? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Am I muted? Okay, good. The master said, "Hard is it to deal with who will stuff himself with food the whole day without applying his mind to anything good. Are there not gamesters and chess players? To be one of these would still be better than doing nothing at all."
Thank you, Brian. Who is the translator?
That's the leggy.
Oh, that's Leggy. Okay,
Yes.
great. Okay, so let's share our translation. Okay, that's the translation Amang and I make. Okay, so Amang, you want to read or you are not able to read?
Yeah, I can read. Book 17, verse 22. The master said, "To be sated with food all day long and not use one's mind, it's hard to deal with him. Aren't there people who play board games or go game? I would even, it would be even worthier to act like them."
All right, thank you, Amang. This one is a short one, and then I think the message is simple basis talking. Confucius really don't like the people. I think the Confucianism, the big concern. We always ask why we need to be moral, and in Confucianism, being moral is a significant difference between animal and the human. So if you only eat your food all day long without using your mind, there will be no different than a woman than a animal. So here Confucius said, is there anything else you can do? At least you can play board game or go game. They were better than doing nothing. I think that's his message. And here, a lot of people kind of ask the Go, the Go game. Today we call Go game. That's the word "yi" that means Go game, and the board basically is kind of board game. But in today, we probably don't know what does he meant. Okay, the board game. Okay, but we are pretty sure the other thing he is talking about is the Go game. So that's it. And Amang, you have anything to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to readdress the sated with food all day long. Time and context. We're talking about 2,500 years ago, ancient China. The average person's daily existence was subsistence. And so to be able to be sated with food was a luxury. It wasn't necessarily something everyone experienced all the time. And Confucius is pointing out here that a person who does have that luxury to then not use their mind, but to do some other sort of idle thing or wasteful thing is worse than somebody who only puts their mind to activities in game form, in something with no stakes, but at least that person is using their mind in some way. And this harkens back to one of Confucius' core lessons, the paramount importance of learning, that if a person has the ability and time to learn, they should be doing so. If you have that ability, but you're whiling it away in sloth or in useless activity, that is pretty much the Confucian cardinal sin.
Thank you, Amang. Look, guys, we have hands up. Mark, please.
Thanks, Jason. I don't know if you read any other translations beforehand, but I was just looking at the Leggy, and it says something about without applying his mind to anything good. And I think you have translated it without applying his mind, period.
Thank
So,
you. The Chinese word has no something good, just not using your mind.
I think what you're getting there is Leahy's interpretation that he just slipped into translation, which is not unheard of. It was actually the Leahy version that was read by Bryant before we shared ours. But yeah, it's Leahy's way of saying that there are value judgments in using your mind, whereas the actual Chinese doesn't explicitly say that, but it would be very well implied.
Yeah, here the 无所用心, okay, that's nothing about mind. No place to use your mind or heart, but it doesn't say good or bad. Okay, so I think that's the Leahy's inserting word. Let's put it this way. Joe, please.
So I'm assuming you're on number 23
22.
or 22. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I would just say to Mark's comment is that the idea of good, I mean, if you're applying your mind, you would obviously want to apply it to something that was, productive, which actually kind of gets to the point of this, I think this passage, that you have an ability to apply your mind, but rather you choose not to. So it says, the Leahy version says the master said, hard is to deal with who will stuff himself with food the whole day without applying his mind to anything good. And there are not gamesters and chess players. To be one of these would still be better than doing nothing at all. So that the idea that some action is this better than just existing. And so the idea that, and I think actually Aman captured it well with this idea of slothfulness. Why is slothfulness actually something that is not desirable? Because you have the ability to do something, you're given an opportunity, and you're not necessarily pursuing anything. So therefore, you're actually almost, what it means to be human is to be able to actually move forward with some degree of intention. And not only move degree with some forward of intention, but the idea is something that's good. So that, that it's, and even if you're not doing anything at all, well, then really it's the opposite of good, actually, I would say. So in a way, it's I think in a way this is kind of speaking to a number of different things. The importance of pursuing and learning. It's part of your character and maintaining your character, as well as how you eventually understand the world and how to actually interact with others. So the idea of even understanding something like duty comes from the fact that you're actually using your faculties of judgment. So the idea is that you could probably be using your faculty of judgment playing chess, but in doing nothing, you're not using anything. So you're in complete, you're completely idle. Mm-hmm. So that's just a thought in the sense that, yeah, you're squandering your opportunity. You're not spoken enough. Anyway.
Well said. Thank you, Joe. Mark, please. Oh, we have a lot of hands up. Let's go this order. Mark, Nick, Kevin, and Kwang. Okay. Mark, please.
Okay, thanks. I raised my hand before Quan logged on. So I was going to say that if Quan were here, I think that there's a hierarchy implied here in number 22, in chapter 22, because you have those who are just filling their bellies, and then you have the gamers over here, and then you have maybe the Jinzu or someone else above. So I was hoping that I would be able to relate this to the hexagrams to demonstrate that the first level was on the lower trigram, but I'm going to hold back on that and wait until Quan wants to speak.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. So in other words, in today's world, you play game will be better than do nothing. That's put this way. Nick and Kevin. Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. I see a parallel to the Greek thought that a life of reflection is better than a life of pig. So, just thinking, these guys were thinking more or less in the same time without knowing each other, but have the similar thoughts on the value of life. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Nick. Kevin, please.
Okay, I unmute myself. Yes, thank you. I got a 2-point weird. I'm first one is from feel the belly, and it's used to be it's a hard job. These days, I would say maybe food we kind of fill out the belly. However, for cost of living, it's compared from the United States compared to 30, 40 years ago. Manufacturer job, agriculture job, I would say losing. And so my point is how, as human being, how good living, we switch our industry focus from those solid job to finance job. High tech makes sense. However, you play money around, so stocks, mutual fund, and it looks good. However, those few people or players can make money. The rest of majority of population get harder and harder. So that's from that angle, I would say it's still it's a big part. A second one is weird about a game. I would say game is booming. If today we talk about Chinese philosophy, if I mention that Black Myth Wukong, that's another one of 4 classic journey for Western. I guess that's it's the big this industry, gaming industry, is bigger than the music and the movie industry. 2 times I heard. I didn't find a reference yet. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Kwang, please.
Yes, this one can be very funny because I remember that Aman was speaking of the Mian picture, meaning the people facing the wall, maybe 2 weeks ago, which was the Chinese expression for the people doing meditation. And I said that the Chinese tradition is not against meditation because once again, from the Zhongyong, that which has been ordained by heaven is your nature, and to lead by your nature is called the Tao, and to cultivate the Tao is called the teaching. But I would say that there is a lot of misunderstanding within Chinese civilization with Buddhism, because in Buddhist epistemology, often they would talk about emptying the mind or having nothing in the mind and things like that. And often it would bring a kind of conflict between the Chinese tradition and Buddhist epistemology, which is, in my mind, a tragedy because I wouldn't take Mark's invitation to come back to the hexagram, because the hexagram proposed 6 layers of the mind. And the more you go up the ladders of the layers of the mind, the more you would have to spend energy for that layer of the mind. That's for sure that the first line, which is sense perception, which is more filling your belly precisely, you still use your mind, but not at the highest level. And playing the games of Po and Yi would be the second layer of the mind, the intellect, and having social sophisticated relations would be the third layers of the mind. And the beginning of the meditational adventure would start with layer 4, going to layer 5, and finally culminating in layer 6. But those meditational spaces are not empty in the ordinary sense of the word empty, but rather spaces of high energy or high mind activities. So, but what is certain that this paragraph 17.822 reflects certainly one of the center of the Confucianist tradition, which is once again centered on learning. So that learning goes through 6 layers, and filling one belly is certainly one layer, but that is the lowest layer. So Confucius was proposing to go at least to the second layer, and better to the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth. And once again, those 6 layers is because I'm speaking of my beloved object, which is the hexagram from the I Ching. I stop here.
All right, thank you, Kwang. So I assume we have no more. So let's move on for the next one, which chapter 23. Anyone want to read translation? Oh,
yeah, I can read Professor Ino's translation.
Okay, that's a good.
Yeah.
Professor Ino from Kwang and Joe. Okay.
Okay, so Professor Robert Ino's translation, 17.23. Zulu said, "Does the Chunzi prize valor?" The master said, "The Chunzi gives righteousness the topmost place. If a Chunzi had valor but not righteousness, he would create chaos. If a small person has valor and not righteousness, he becomes a bandit."
Thank you, Kwang. Joe, you want to read your translation?
Yeah, sure. So this is the leggy. Zulu said, "Does a superior man esteem valor?" The master said, "The superior man holds righteousness to be of highest importance. A man in superior situation, having valor without righteousness, will be guilty of insubordination. One of the lower people, having valor without righteousness, will commit robbery."
Thank you, Joe. Let's go to the Aman, please.
Book 17, Chapter 23. Zulu said, "Does a junsa esteem bravery?" The master said, "A junsa puts yi at the top. If a junsa has bravery but no yi, he will cause turmoil. If a small man has bravery but no yi, he will become a robber, thief."
Thank you, Aman. Here has a lot of words, especially for the first time joining us. Probably I need something to explain, because first talk about Zilu. Zilu is one of Confucius' old disciple. He is only 9 years younger than Confucius, and his bravery, he is kind of bodyguard for Confucius. So a lot of time, Zilu as a question is related to his temperament, okay, because he's kind of the rush, hurry, and the bravery. That's why he will ask about bravery or valor if you want to talk about, because that's his strength. Second, Confucius knows his personality, so always tell him. So he told him, 君子 must put E at the top. Okay, so first I translate 君子, this word, as 君子. I refuse to translate as superior man, moral man, profound man. Okay, because this one is important because Confucius talk about 君子. It would be similar to Aristotle talk about high spiritual man. Okay, this kind of concept. So he talk about 君子, okay, which has a high role model. Always put E. That's another word I don't translate, and usually people translate as righteousness. I think this word means righteousness, also means duty. So I think at one time, one person asked me, what's the ancient Chinese word for duty? I think through probably only E is the best one if I have to choose. Okay, so another way to translate is duty. So I just translate as E, okay, the top. So I think then come to Confucius' reasoning. Okay, so if 君子 has a bravery but no E, okay, not follow the duty, or he will cause turmoil, 为乱, that's turmoil. And usually when Confucius talk about 君子, the next thing Confucius will talk about is small man. Small man is the opposite of 君子, not necessarily a bad people or immoral people. Basically, it's the person who doesn't train or study enough to lift himself or herself to the level of 君子. Let's put it this way. So it's called small man. Okay, I just use the word-to-word translation, 小人, small man. So a 君子 do it without E. I think the logic here is if you are a 君子, you do it without E will cause turmoil. Okay, will cause the problem. He assumed 君子 is working for the government job. A small man, okay, doesn't do has a bravery without E, not follow the righteousness or not follow his duty. He will become the Chinese words use Dao. Okay, so Amang and I have some discussion about which word to use back and forth. And he probably prefer use sift. I prefer use rubber, and the Leggy use bandit. Okay, I think and whatever basics means will be criminal. Let's put it this way. Okay, so I think that's the translation here. Okay, Amang, please.
Thank you. And for those of you who are first time joining us, this is a great litmus test of the differences in translations and the choices translators get to make. So just digging into the weeds a bit, here we have probably some of the most retained untranslated Chinese words, and there's logic and reasoning to choosing not to translate certain words in Chinese to English. One can be because of its profound intrinsic meaning in its own language, and that a sort of facsimile of it in the target language, in this case from Chinese to English, just doesn't do it. Yi. And Yi is a good example of one of these words where I think both Leggy and Inu chose to translate it as righteousness. But Yi, as I dropped it in the chat, because I kind of knew this was one that the etymology was going to need to be, or the definition was going to have to be teased out a little bit more. It has layers of complex meaning. So it's better to retain sometimes that Chinese word and induce your reader to take it on its own terms. Same with junzi. A junzi is the exemplar of Confucius, Analects, and training program. Everyone is training to be a junzi. He never defines it, but he always intimates back to it. He always points back at it in almost all of his teachings throughout the Analects. And that word choice between robber and thief for Dao, I suggested thief primarily because he's talking about a small man prior to this. For him, the Shaoren, or the small man, often can find themselves in esteemed positions. And almost definitionally, what makes them small to his mind is that they take advantage of that position and don't treat it with both the reverence and the necessary sort of preemptive character to bring to it that a junsa would have. And so when we think of a robber, we tend to think of somebody, walking up to you at an ATM, sticking a gun in your back and saying, sticking them up. That's kind of the English connotation in modern language. Thief, we talk about like thieves of industry or somebody who was a thief and embezzled. And I think that is the sort of thief or criminal that he's kind of indicating here slightly more than some thug with a gun, but somebody who actually will simply rob the coffers of the ministry. And so that's where our disagreement came in. I appreciate that you kept my suggestion even in the parenthetical there. But yeah, so terse little chapter, but lots to be able to examine in it.
Yeah, thank you, Imam. When you talk about this, I think about things because one thing important here is I try to search the word. Anybody know? Please, just let me know. During this time, this word "dao" could both means robber and thief. Okay, it means both because I don't see any word for thief only during this time. Today's language has thief, tow, but this word is not there during that time. Okay, so it could be both robber and the thief. And then you go back to chapter 12. Okay, I think it's 12. Okay, Confucius used a very interesting example. He said, right, one who is dignified in appearance but feeble within is just like any other small man. He is also like a robber. Remember, same word, Dao. Okay, the robber, but who only dare to crawl through a small window on the wall. So you look at this behavior. It's not robber. It's a thief. Okay, so basics he during that time probably don't have proper word for thief. So this word robber or Dao could mean both as either thief or robber. So that's put this way. All right, thank you. We have a few hands up. That's from Joe and Kevin, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is actually kind of getting to something deep, which is the reason as to why it's important to pursue knowledge in the first place. Because if you do not have right reason, the idea of bravery and courage actually becomes a vice. Mm-hmm. So it actually ends up being that you're great, you're brave, but you're pursuing the wrong thing. So that type of action is not only it's not only harmful in the sense to someone else, but it's also harmful to your own personal character. So there's that other aspect of it where it kind of relates back to the previous passage in some way, in the sense of temperance, if you look at it from that perspective. The idea of someone that is eating only for their own personal pleasure has this inability to temper their own satiety mechanism, if you will. So this ability to not be able to kind of withhold yourself is then, well, from that perspective, you don't necessarily want somebody to be courageous, because they would actually be harming themselves, right? So that, in a sense, that if you're running into a house, right, if you're brave and that's burning down, but essentially at the same time, if there's no chance that you can actually get out, well, then you also want to be wise with that. So you have to have courage and wisdom, and then there's an element of temperance as well as you're tempering your desire to want to help in the first place. So there's what I'm really trying to get to in a convoluted way is the unity of virtues. Is that what you're kind of seeing in this passage? Is how they're interrelated and not necessarily can be practiced in a vacuum.
Thank you, Joe. Kevin, please.
Yes, thank you. I just use two words, a keyword. One is duty, brave, for Yi, and bravery for Yong. Actually, Chinese PRC, the national anthem, it's called March of Volunteer, called 义勇军进行曲. It's used that two words, put the duty first, the bravery second, and maybe no connection, just brainstorm. Thank you.
No, that's great. I'm not sure it's coincidence or that to follow the Confucius. Okay, so yeah, actually that's very true. Kwang, thank you, please.
I would like to say that the fact that we have many words for bandit nowadays is maybe an enrichment of the vocabulary, but certainly a poverty of morality. Because in the past, anyone who has a bad behavior is simply called a bandit. He can be a thug or a minister, but if he's stealing or embezzling or prevaricating, he's a bandit. Okay, so there's no fine distinction in the past because the morality was higher. And I would say that maybe valor here, I would say a small person who has valor and not righteousness would be on the second line of the hexagram, because the second line of the hexagram for Plato and Socrates is called a plutocratic man. And I would like to remind everyone a famous plutocratic man called Thrasymachus in the dialogue Republic, who defined justice as the advantage of the powerful. Okay, so a man with valor in the sense of courage, but also in the sense of capacity to be organized, to have some talent, but not having justice, well, that person is guided, if we can say guided in his life, by the idea that justice is the advantage of the powerful. So, and the Junzi gave righteousness the topmost place, meaning that the education for the Junzi is precisely to go at least to the fourth layer of the mind within the hexagram, meaning that that is the mind layer corresponding to E precisely, to justice. And from there, because you have awareness, because you have justice, humanity, true valor, and wisdom, you will be capable to use your talent, meaning your organizational capacity, your capacity to be brave, because most of the time bravery or courage comes from self-confidence. And self-confidence very often comes from the fact that you are organized in your mind. And that is precisely the plutocratic man, okay? The man at the second layer or second line of the hexagram, he's organized in his mind, thus he's more courageous than the average. But without the mind layers of valor, humanity, and wisdom, he would do things according to the principle, if we can call it the principle, that justice is the advantage of the powerful and not justice at the fourth line of the hexagram. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang, for the detailed explanation. And I agree with you on the moral decay. Okay, yeah, because right now it's probably during that time they call Dao bandit. That's everything. Thief, rapist, harasser. Everything probably just like one word, but today we have to separate. Okay, Joe, please.
Yeah, just really quickly. I mean, I think that that's an excellent point that Juan has just made. I mean, it is, and there's a Socratic dialogue with the idea that justice is for the strong, and then there's a whole dialogue about that in Plato. But it's also really important to note here is that in the absence of ethics, it's actually an intellect can even become a vice. So that you're actually, you're only looking at what would be good in the sense that you're increasing your ability to be able to do something, but it has to be in relationship to something else. And that is the idea of being able to pursue something that is good. So for the, an example is that often used is that a Stoic cannot be a Nazi, because for this very reason is because it would obviously be violating something that would be your character and your relationship to the world and other people, whereas that is a society at one point that had been in advanced materially as much as any nation in the world. So when in absence of ethics and absence of wisdom, then what the result is something on a scale. This is something in the industrial age that can be, extreme, obviously detrimental to humanity. So if it's all about our relationships to each other, then this shows you is that wisdom is not relegated to only your capacity to understand, in which case Quan pointed out beautifully, then it would be justice is for the strong.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, we have Nick, then Paul, then Mark. Okay, Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. Jason, could you put up your translation on the screen? That would help me to say what I want to say. Because I want to focus.
20. Okay, here. Okay, see.
Yeah. This section focus on one concept. You translate as bravery. I heard Kwang using valor.
Yeah.
So the Chinese yong, so the teacher and student were debating on what's the meaning of this concept yong. And it's very clear Confucius was dissecting this concept into two cases, right? In one case is justified, in other cases it's unjustified. And so it doesn't give me the sense that it corresponds to the Greek concept of Andrea, which is a virtue. By definition, it's bravery, valor, courage. So by definition, it's a virtue already. But here, clearly, Confucius see two sides of it. In one case, justified boldness, that is bravery, courage. And in other case, it's unjustified boldness, fearlessness. So and that's and the original Chinese character for yong, has those multiple connotations. So it doesn't one-to-one corresponds to the Greek idea of Andrea.
Okay, thank you. So in your opinion, which one would be better? Okay, bravery or valor? Or
neither. Because it just says fearlessness.
Okay, if I force you to choose,
fearful of anything. In one case, if it's justified, if it is, associated with with justice, then it is courage. But if it is abused, if it is unjustified, abused by certain little guys, then it is only fearlessness, because the guy would, do whatever evil without fearing the consequences.
Thank you. Okay, I fully understand. And so thank you very much for this one. And then let's go to Paul, please.
Yeah, I'm interested in, there's a phrase I use actually in my work with people and also, but I don't know where it came from. And one of you guys probably do, but I'm curious to your thoughts about relating it to this particular chapter. And the phrase is that everyone's greatest strength is their greatest weakness. So applied in this light, if you have huge valor in one context, that will be your greatest strength. But if your ego basically takes over and destroys the righteousness and you're using it in your own service, it becomes your greatest weakness. And I don't know if I'm doing an injustice to this by laying that on it. And also if there's a concept in the whole Confucius way of thinking of almost like a temptation, like in order to make sure that you stay in this higher place, you need to be consciously working on the application of righteousness, and you could fall and then you could come back and that kind of thing. So those are my thoughts and questions and observations.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Yoso. Anybody have a comment? I have no comment on that. Huang, you have a comment on Paul?
Yes, I have a
Yeah,
comment
please.
because
Go ahead. Yeah.
Paul is mentioning the chapter 17.16, okay? Because once again, the center of Confucianism is Haoshui, okay? Eager to learn, as Jason said, love to learn, is Haoshui. In the 17.16, the master said, in former times, the people had three weaknesses, but today these have disappeared. The reckless man of the past exceeded proper constraint, and reckless man today disruptive. Also, he also had the 17.8 is also stronger in relation to what Paul said, okay? Because when 17.8 is practically exactly what you said, Paul. Because the master said, Yo, have you heard the 6 imperatives and the 6 related flaws of narrow vision? Zulu replied, No, I have not. Sit, I will teach them to you. If you love a run, but you do not love learning, the flaw is ignorance. If you love knowledge, but you do not love learning, the flaw is unruliness. Okay? So I would not read the 6, but I just read the first 2 to give you an idea is what you said is really at the center of Confucianism, in the sense that you can be moved by a noble impulse. But if that noble impulse is not nurtured by the light of awareness, then that light of awareness will be given to you by learning. You will end up having a behavior that is chaotic because of that prime noble impulse, but which has not been refined by learning.
Yeah, thank you, Kwang. I think that Kwang made a very good point. It's a whole Confucius. Okay, that's even only have a 10,000 character. But very importantly, some people criticize Confucius as too conservative. But he has his progressive side, because during that society, the ancient society, it's hierarchical. But his progressive side, or we can call revolutionary side, is even you are a common people, you have a chance to become nobleman, okay, through learning. I think that's his progressive or revolutionary idea, which is not your innate talent, which is learning, eager to learn, willing to learn. That's important. Thank you. We have Mark and what's that? Joe. Okay, Mark, please.
I was intrigued by Kwan's bringing up Thrasymachus, the one who would appear to be courageous in the public arena, but without really being guided by any wisdom of any sort. And I was wondering, within Chinese history, you know, I've been trying to piece together a little bit of the history of Confucius's time and the way in which he was trying to get the three kind of families. I think it was the Ji, the Meng, and the Shu, to put down their walls to help to reinstall the Duke. And apparently they may have been amenable to this idea, but there were a number of revolts, people who led revolts at this time. And maybe these names ring a bell to some people. Yang Hu was a retainer of the Ji, and he rebelled at one time. Then Han Fu was a governor, and he rebelled against the Shu. And then Gong Shang was another person who rebelled against the Ji. So eventually, I think Confucius gave up on this idea of getting these three minor principalities to put down their walls and have some sort of a unified Li kingdom of some sort. So were these the kinds of characters he may have had in mind in warning against valor absent any kind of Yi?
Well, thank you to bring up, and they are in the same chapter. So, you know, and then it could be, you know, then they put in the same chapter, you know, could have a reason, you know. Thank you to bring up this super idea. Joe, please.
Yeah, just really quickly, because I only caught the end of it. I had to step away for 1 minute, but as Nick was talking about how the concepts don't necessarily align from the idea of what the Greeks had said concerning the idea of justice and what Confucius was saying. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, okay. So, okay, I think I missed one thing. Okay, so we talk about it could be righteousness. I talk about duty. And another meaning could be justice. Okay, so justice, if you ask me, what's the word justice? Okay, which Plato talk about 1,000 times, and what Confucius is talking about. Well, if I have to pick, I probably have to pick again. So unfortunately, that's one word that has many, many meanings. Okay. So anyway, I think
so
go ahead.
Quick question then. So are these two synonymous with one another? In other words, so the concept here becomes very important, because the question that I really have is then how does this individual that has courage or bravery become a robber? That's the question. So in the context of that, what is the concept actually then capturing? Because if it's capturing duty, then that's one thing. But this is where context matters, and this is why it's like important to have these concepts actually, you know, kind of mapped out so that the words that we use are translated. And two, don't create a confusion, because if I look at it as duty, how do you perform a duty and then become a robber? So is he saying that, like, I mean, so that would be kind of the question that that's what I'm trying to synthesize here. Is it within the context of this statement, what does it mean?
So can I take one quick crack and then I'll let everybody else have it? So I think you caught in on the tail end with what Nick was talking about. He wasn't talking about Yi, he was talking about Yong, which was the word translated as bravery. And he was saying that bravery doesn't line up quite with that sort of Greco-Roman concept of it. It really just means fearlessness in a very sort of blanket way. And if you can imagine being fearless without a sense of loyalty, duty, justice, honor, then you're fearless enough to go walking into a bank with a gun and say, stick them up. And that's kind of where I think Confucius is pointing the finger here.
That's a very important distinction. I appreciate that very much. That was, thank you for that.
All right, thank you. So look, guys, Nick, you have something to say since that's pointed to your question.
Yeah, but Amin said better than what I might have said.
Okay, thank you. Kwang, please.
I just want to, it's about what we are just talking right now, and I just want to push a little bit the depth of the epistemological understanding of the hexagram, okay? Because most of the time, let's not forget that lines 1, 2, 3 is the animal kingdom, and line 3, 4, 5, 6 is the timeless kingdom. But those two kingdoms are expressions of the powers of the mind. So when we are talking about justice for line 4, I think that a better expressions for line 4 is not justice, is the mind powers of justice. And line 5 is the mind powers of valor and humanity. And line 6 is the mind powers of wisdom. So if the animal kingdom, which is made by the mind powers of sense perception, line 1, line 2, the mind powers of the intellect, meaning categorization, words, concepts, images, and line 3, the mind powers of social sophistication and understanding our emotions and the emotions of others. Those three together are called the animal kingdom. So there are qualities that are related to the animal kingdom. But if you don't have the mind powers of 4, 5, and 6, you will behave like an animal. And in the animal kingdom, you have animals who are powerful. For example, you have a cat, you have dog, you have rats, but you also have leopards, you also have lions, you also have eagles. So those in the animal kingdom who are fearless are like wolves or lions or tigers, okay? I think that somewhere Confucius compare a nobleman without virtues to a tiger, meaning that he's fearless, he's powerful, and he would behave in such a way that he wouldn't satisfy his selfish desires, but he would not be guided by the upper trigram, meaning the mind powers of justice, valor, humanity, and wisdom. I stop here.
Right. Thank you, Kwang. One thing I forget to mention is some people traditionally talk about this phrase is the first conversation when Confucius, Zilu met Confucius. Okay, that's the first opening question. Okay, I have no evidence, but there's a traditional, according to Zhu Xi's comment, Hu Yan, that's a scholar, historian during the Song Dynasty, the 11th century. He talked about, he suspect that's the question, the first question when Zilu meet Confucius. Okay. Kevin, please.
Yeah, here's my 2 cents about the Chinese words. I think English words somehow like this too. First is from the original meaning or from the materialized, very solid meaning. Another one is a metaphorical way. For example, Yong, this one we consider bravery. It's like put it there. Basically, physically, you can do something. If you beg to joke, bring good question. Okay, somebody bravery, then if you only focus brave, it can be robber or thief, because you less care consideration about why you're doing this action. So that's a second one, 勇气. That's about the qi. The qi is a more important concept in Chinese too, right? So if you have, even I'm not strong, but I still have that kind of courage. And so that's translated to valor. I hope the
Yeah.
Aman and Jason.
Yeah, basically well, that's just my personal preference. That's nothing right or wrong, but I just try to keep consistent in my translation. So usually I will translate yong as a bravery, okay? And 勇气 I will translate as a courage because it's still in the qi and never go out. That's the way I'm thinking, but I don't expect everybody agree, but I just try to be consistent during my translation. Yeah. Joe, please.
No, and just really quickly, I appreciate what Quan just said, this idea of fearless, right? Because you can be fearless, right? But that doesn't necessarily imply courage, because courage would actually require some degree of intention where you're overcoming the fear. So this idea of being on the lower end of the triagram would, and this is to Nick's point, that the direct translation isn't there. So if it's on the lower end of the triagram where you're almost acting instinctually without any fear, versus this idea then if it were truly courage, then it would require fear and overcoming. So then that would be more in line with the idea of knowledge, so that you have knowledge of actually what it is, but yet you're acting in spite of your fear. So this element of then somebody that is fearless that becomes a robber, it's like, wow, then they just are reacting in the world and they're in the lower end of the triagram and not in the second part of the triagram. So it's a much more succinct way of actually capturing the concepts themselves between the idea of fearlessness, because there is that distinction of you can't be courageous without any fear.
Thank you, Joe. So we shall move on. Okay. Chapter 24.
I think we missed Paul, and after
Oh,
Paul,
sorry,
we should
Paul.
definitely get to 24.
Okay, Paul, sorry. Go ahead.
Just quickly, it really echoes the past few points and Joe's point, especially that there's no reason to sort of get to the fine points of robber versus thief, because this is just representative of the general idea, just as Joe said. So I won't take longer than that. But another example of, there are people who really want to commit suicide, but they're afraid. They don't have courage to kill themselves. It's just another example. It's not only about robbers and thieves. And that's kind of what Joe was saying. This is representative of this combination of something, you've got a lot of strength, and if you don't combine it with a virtue, it could lead to something detrimental. So that's all I wanted to add.
All right, thank you. Let's move on. 24. Okay, so I assume Kwang want to read Robert. Okay, Professor Eno.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so translation by Professor Robert Eno, 17.24. Zukong said, does the Junzi have things he hates? The master said, he does. He hates those who proclaim other men's faults. He hates those who occupy inferior positions but who slander their superiors. He hates those who are valorous but lack li. He hates those who are bold but lack understanding. The master went on, do you too have things you hate? I hate those who think that having spied out things is wisdom. I hate those who think being uncompliant is valor. I hate those who think insulting others is straightforwardness.
Thank you, Kwang. Anyone want to read? Joe, want to read?
Yeah, I'm good.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Zogong said, has the superior man his hatreds also? The master said, he has his hatreds. He hates those who proclaim the evil of others. He hates the man who, being in a low station, slanders his superiors. He hates those who have valor merely and are unobservant of propriety. He hates those who are forward and determined, and at the same time of contracted understanding. The master then inquired, CI, Have you also your hatreds? Zagong replied, I hate those who pry out matters and ascribe the knowledge to their wisdom. I hate those who are only not modest and think that they are valorous. I hate those who make known secrets and think that they are straightforward.
Thank you, Joe. Let's share our translation. 24.
Book 17, chapter 24. Zagong said, does a Junzi detest some people? The master said, he detests some people. He detests those who advertise the badness of others. He detests those who are at the inferior position but ridicule their superiors. He detests those who are brave but lack understanding of rituals. He detests those who are resolute but obstructive, stubborn. And he said, does Zagong detest some? I detest those who take the trivial as knowledge. I detest those who take disobedience as bravery. I detest those who take accusing others as straightforwardness.
Thank you, Amam. I think this one is interesting. First, I noticed is Zigong's conversation. Zigong is much younger than Confucius. Based on my check, is 31 years younger than Confucius. So it's quite young. But Confucius kind of treat him as like equal. And one of the reason he's quite successful financially. He made a lot of money. I think so. And then after Confucius died, he kind of take a position of Confucius. I'm not talking about in academic or in the Confucian school. He take a position political. He got a high position, got hired by the state of Lu as a governor. So from time to time, people ask like, "Oh, is Zigong better than Confucius?" That's the question come out later when after Confucius died. So he's a very important person. And personally, I mean myself, really like what Zigong the idea, because he is represent a successful and good in the language and a good model. That's my personal so if you look at every time you see a conversation between Confucius and the Zigong, it's kind of same level, okay, kind of conversation. So here's the interesting. Zigong asked Confucius, right? As a Junzi is something you distaste. Is what kind of people you hate, you dislike. That Confucius talk about 4 kinds of the people, right? The first 2 kinds is about the language, right? You advertise, okay? You spread the bad message of other people. You ridicule, okay? You make fun of your boss, superiors, right? And the last 2 is about action, right? You bravery without the, which is ritual. Like the previous one, right? Confucius talk about bravery without duty or righteousness. But when you talk about duty, is always associated with rituals, okay? Okay, or some, you want to call it a social norm or tradition, okay? So that's the problem Confucius dislike. And also talk about the people who the last one is the person who is stubborn, right? He who actually is resolute, but actually is stubborn. Okay, so that's a Confucius dislike, detest. Then interesting is Confucius turn back to ask Zigong, Si is his given name, so Confucius will call him Si. Okay, yeah, kind of general conversation. Anything you dislike, you detest, and Si asks this question is kind of want to compare notes, compare himself with Confucius. So Si said 3 kinds of things, right? It's all related to language if we pay attention. Okay, well, not all related to language. Talk about mind, behavior, and the word, right? First, they talk about you only know small thing, but you think you are smart, you have a full of knowledge, you are rebellious, and you think you are bravery, and then you criticize other people, okay, and you think you are straightforward. I think that actually I like Zigong's comment much better than Confucius' comment, and I think I just like Zigong. Let's put it this way. Anyway, Aman, please.
Yeah, I like this chapter. It really feels like spring and autumn's office hours. This feels like a conversation that a student and a professor would have in office hours outside of class, not for all the prying ears, because it's divulging of the self, you know. And he asks what a junzi detest, and Confucius lays out a list, but he's talking about his own hatreds, the things he finds detestable. And so Tzu is a smart kid. He's picked up on, you know, that you're abstracting for plausible deniability or for whatever reasons. But when you ask me directly, I can answer candidly because we're having as close to a candid conversation as we can have. I just really like the tone of this. It feels like an office hours conversation with a student where it's like, what really ticks you off? And it's like, well, I got to be judicious while you're still a student. So let me tell you about what a noble person would find detestable, or yeah. So other than the tone, I'm not going to belabor this too much. I just really enjoyed the tone of this one.
Thank you, Aman. Joe, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually about language, actually very much like what you said, Jason, in the sense that, and I'm trying to look at the two, you know, the different translations here as well. And as I'm looking at them, the idea where is, you know, there, he's stating something like the idea of bravery without understanding. I mean, that gets to what we were just talking about a moment ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you use the word ridicule, which is interesting because the idea of ridicule can only be used in a negative sense. So I get the idea that it is going between this idea of something that somebody that lacks an understanding ultimately, where it goes from, you know, the idea that, but ridicule is something that can never be good per se, right? You never want to ridicule someone else in the sense that you're basically it can never be a positive, I would say, right? So it seems like there's this distinction where he's talking about knowledge and wisdom. That part is clear, right? But then the words don't necessarily match up between knowledge and wisdom all the time. I mean, the three translations are a little bit different, but there is that movement in between the trigrams, as Juan would say, between the upper and the middle, and that movement. I don't know. I mean, the word ridicule is just a little bit. It seems like it's just not a positive. So it almost seems like ridicule would be part of the lower trigram, because it would be almost like almost a behavior that is just untoward in any circumstance. So I don't. Maybe asking about that word.
Yeah, that's the word. Right now, I have to rethink about the translation. That word is ridicule or make somebody. Okay, that's one kind of smile, the laughing. Okay, but criticizing laughing. In Confucius, Analects, okay, there's a three laughing. This is the one you may claim it's never be good. I'm not sure it's correct or not, but I just translate as ridicule. Okay, so
yeah, I'm just thinking about the consistency in applying so I mean, I'm not saying that the translation is wrong per se. I'm just wondering if, you know, there's this movement between these two. I mean, I have no expertise to say what's right or wrong, so it doesn't matter.
I just want to say, see, first, I think it's consistent, advising somebody's badness, right? Okay. Well, shoot, I meant just 1 minute. Undo. Okay. So advertising the badness, that's the bad thing, always bad, right? The inferior, ridicule others, always bad. Okay. Obstructive or stubborn, always bad. So
resolute but obstructive. It's resolute. Resolute is something that actually can be good. So that's a distinction between, because you want somebody that can be, but not in the terms of obstructing, right?
Okay. I think that's one. I think you okay, because we read in English, so it doesn't match. If we line up, okay. So first you talk about 称人, okay, so that means comment on people. That can be good or bad, right? And the usual compare with this one is 居下流, that means stay in the lower position, which could be good or bad, right? And bravery could be good or bad. Resolute could be good or bad. I think that's the point you need to compare, not the ridicule. Okay, so talking about people, right, can be good or bad. Stay in the lower position can be good or bad. Bravery can be good or bad. Being resolute could be good or bad. But you talking about people's badness, it's bad. You ridicule people, it's bad. You without riches is bad. Be obstructive or stubborn is bad. I think that's the comparison.
Correct. And so that gets back to this idea of the lack of understanding, which is actually in the previous passage as well, right? So you're brave, but you're actually, or fearless, whatever you are, it's without wisdom. So that's kind of what this is all kind of getting to. And that's why I was kind of just thrown off by a little bit in the wording here. So it is all about words, in the sense that it's the relationship between the trigrams and the words themselves. And when you see that, it's kind of like, okay, then what's he really saying? Because you're capturing it, right? You want to be resolute, but you don't want to necessarily be obstructive, because that's unwise. So you have this virtue that then becomes a vice. And so that's so that, you know, these things not pointed in the right direction are actually then become vices. And that's comes back to this previous of the idea of the unity of these ideas and concepts. Anyway, but I appreciate walking me through.
But the reason is, at least some people have a different interpretation. I don't see this one is make you become wise. Okay, I think he's talking about the just very simple conversation. What kind of person you don't like? Just like amongst talking about the office hour conversation. Joe, what kind of people I don't like? You list something, and Joe asked me, Jason, and any kind of person you don't like, and I think that's a very common.
Yeah, they possess a virtue, but they direct it in the wrong way. I mean, so that, I mean, if I were to sum that all up, I mean, if that's what I would just, you know, if he, you know, you're in office hours, I'd be like, well, you know, somebody that, you know, really get it, but then they don't, then they just completely fall off the tracks. So anyway, it's just an interesting, when you're aligning the concepts with the actual words, which gets to my main point, is I do think it's all about the words.
Okay, Kwang, yeah, please.
I would like to say that this chapter 14 is really incredible because I want to talk about the chapter in its entirety because we almost at the end of the chapter, right? And this chapter, once again, is at the center of Confucianism, meaning the love to learn, to be eager to learn, 好学. And once again, what are the three domains of learning? Learning information, learning skills, know-how, but the most important, learning being, okay? Learning how to be aware, how to be conscious. And I'm sorry, I will show you an image here of an hexagram, okay? That's hexagram 11. You have the lower trigram made of three unbroken lines and the upper trigram made of three unbroken lines. It could be, I could have chosen any one of the 64, but I chose that one because it's the trigram, the hexagram means supreme peace. And on the other side, you have the character for Wang, meaning king. I want just to say that the vertical line of king means awareness. So after having shown that, I would like to say that in medical psychology, in clinical evaluation, there is one thing that is at the center of this chapter, and that is called rationalization. What is rationalization? Rationalization is to use the capacity of the intellect to make excuses rather than to see the reality as it is. For example, Thrasymachus, when he said that justice is the will or the advantage of the powerful, he's using his intellect to give a justification to the fact that he can do what he wants because he's powerful. But that rationalization would happen only when no reason, okay? And reason is an old word that is, well, reason is not an old word, but there is an old meaning of reason. And the old meaning of reason is awareness, okay? So here, reason is in direct opposition to rationalization, meaning that you use not only the talents that you have in the lower trigram, but also the power of awareness that would show you the true reality, okay? And I just want to take one example. He hates those who are bold but lack understanding. I will take another one. I hate those who think insulting others is straightforwardness. If the person who insults others thinking that it is straightforwardness has awareness, he will never think that insulting others is straightforwardness, but it is what it is. He's just insulting the other. Okay. So at the center of Confucianism, you always have the love of learning information, know-how, or skills, and being. And at the center of that love for learning is the distinction between talents, the lower trigram, line 1, 2, 3, and awareness, line 4, 5, 6. And if you have talents, but you don't have awareness, you would end up provoking more problems or giving excuses, which is the ordinary way to say rationalization. Okay, so at the center of Confucianism is the learning to make the distinction between the animal kingdom and the timeless kingdom, or if you want, between rationalization, the animal kingdom, and reason or awareness. I stop here.
All right. Thank you, Kwang. Among you have something?
Yeah, something Quan said actually made me think of it, this being a sort of quintessential chapter on Confucianism. There's a buried subtext here that is as quintessential as learning, and that is the idea of ren, of other, of all this conversation is pertaining to when is it okay to hate somebody, because we're trying to cultivate ren, this, appreciation of other, the identity of myself through another. So when am I supposed to abandon ship, I guess it were? And as you look through these, each of them is something that someone else does that violates that principle in some way. So if you speak badly about others, you're violating the principle of ren. If you ridicule your superior, you're violating it. If you're brave but you lack appreciation for rituals, and so you just kind of, you don't shake my hand when I show up because you're too important for that. You're lacking the basics of ren here. And so I just wanted to point to that as a buried subtext of this chapter that's not very varied, but not explicitly stated.
Yeah, thank you, Aman. Yeah, so Confucius doesn't like the people who I just like everybody. Okay, you got to have somebody you dislike, and he also don't like everybody love you. Okay, that also has a problem. So I think that's very important. Joe, please. We have Joe and Mark. Joe, please.
Yeah, I think this is what, again, this is a really important, and I think Juan captured it really well, because this idea of knowledge in itself can go either way. So this idea that if it's the object that I'm actually focused on, then I'm actually focused on my more animalistic behaviors. And I'm just actually focused on an object that I wish to obtain. Therefore, I'm knowledgeable of something, but I am going to do anything to attain it. However, in the upper triagram, this idea of wisdom is this other aspect, is that no, it's not about my knowledge or the talent that I have, but rather how I use those talents in relation to each other. So it's kind of about the relationship that ultimately is the idea of wisdom, which is kind of how this is, essentially Confucianism ethics, is that how we you can have somebody that would know how to perform, in Confucius terms, know how to perform the ritual in an excellent manner, right? But if they know how to do it and they ridicule it, well, then they actually don't know why they're doing it in the first place. And if they don't know why then they're doing it, then this shows you what it means to have this moral compass that is actually misguided. You're heading in the wrong direction. So I think it's a very powerful passage as well, because it gets to what we were saying even in previous passages, the fearless individual, although, not if we were to just say the courage, let's say courage for the sake of simplicity. But you really don't want somebody that's courageous that's actually not aiming at the right thing. So I appreciate what Quan was saying, that it was this relationship between this rationalization and because you can rationalize, you can actually know how. But the idea of why you're doing something in the first place is completely lost upon you, which means it gets back to even what you were saying earlier with the person that is eating or basically not using their intellect. They're not using their intellect in a meaningful way. So anyway, it's a very powerful message too, as well as because it shows you where you're not necessarily pointed in the right direction.
Thank you, Joe. Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks everyone for riffing on these amazing chapters. One thing I was struck by was, can you hear me?
Yeah.
It seems like there's a subtle dance going on between Confucius and Qigong, because Confucius gives 4 examples and Qigong gives 3 examples, maybe not to match his master or surpass his master and his teacher. But I'm also thinking about what is the relationship between these different examples of things they hate. I think I'm looking at the Leggy translation now because yours isn't on the screen, but for example, they both mention vow according to the Leggy translation. You could argue that Confucius is saying he hates the man who, being in a low position, slanders his superiors. And that could relate to Zigong's those who pry out matters and ascribe the knowledge to their wisdom. Or it could be that Zigong's last phrase, I hate those who make known secrets, think that they are straightforward, can relate to Confucius's 3rd example. He hates those forward and determined and at the same time of contracted understandings. So almost as if subtle dance going on between them and that similar concepts are being reflected back, from master to pupil in a way.
All right. Thank you, Mark. I don't try to match, but that's up to you. Okay. But one thing I'd like to point out, I disagree on Legi's translation on the last one. Zigong said, the make no secret. Is that the last one? Yeah, that's the Legi's translation. And I think that's, I just have to say incorrect, because that word, 劫 means accusing, attacking. So I think it's the proper word. So it's not just make no secret, it's attacking somebody. So that's I point out. And again, in general, I try to read Confucius Analects or any text less serious than most of the scholars, because I see that, for example, like this one, I kind of see, just like Aman said, it's a conversation, office hour conversation, and its essence is a Junzi hate somebody? Oh yes, I hate this kind of guy. Mark, what kind of people you hate? You may pick up a few people, and that's it. That's I take. But of course, you can, or anybody can put in any way you want to understand. That's the purpose of this discussion. That's it. There's no right or wrong. Okay.
Yeah. And if I answered your question, what kind of people do you hate? By saying, oh, I try to find the good in everybody. Then Confucius might say, you're not going to make it in the school.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And the thing about it, that's a difficult question, right? If I ask you, Mark, what kind of people you hate, you're probably not that easy to answer just right now. So I think that's the situation.
Yeah. Just really quickly to the idea of position.
I hate people who ask that question.
Okay, sorry.
To the idea of position that Mark was talking about just a moment ago, really quickly, the idea of the lower person slandering the upper person, right? But slander is never a good thing. So, I mean, the position then is kind of nullified in that particular circumstance. So it's as much about the action and the understanding. And I think what Leggy really captures well is when he said it's basically those who mistaken knowledge for wisdom.
So Leggy translates as slender, that word?
Yeah.
And then I probably have to disagree a little bit on this, okay? Because
yeah, I mean, it's just a question of, yeah,
that's a
but it's a good
that's
point.
the word, one kind of laughing. Okay, so I actually, that if you remember last time we talked about when Ziyu, Confucius visit Ziyu, he hear the sound, right? Confucius smile. That's appreciate of smile. And then I cannot recall, a long time ago, must be like a year ago, when Confucius sit with a lot of people, Confucius asked, how about you talk about your inspiration? And the Zilu start to say, okay, I want to give me a southern, this big country, I can make it strong, powerful. And then Confucius smile. That's another word, shen. That means it's difficult. It's a kind of laughing, but disapprove. Okay, just, oh, you kids talk about this. So they have a different kind of laughing. So at least, some are appreciate, some are disapproval, and some kinds like this one, son, is kind of like criticizing. Let's put it this way. And probably
I'd say that previous one would be a wry grin. It's
yeah, so something like this. So slender, I would believe, is a wrong translation. I'm not saying he doesn't capture the essence. Okay, I just say word to word is not right. And then my principle, I try to be loyal.
What's
to
that?
word.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Paul, please.
I kind of feel like we're dancing really in a fun dance around the question that I'll just ask directly. Where do feelings fit? Because these are feelings. I hate, I can't stand, I detest. Those are feelings, those are emotions. Where do they fit in Confucius's world? Where are they in the epistemology? Because you can have feelings but not act on them. It could be perfectly fine to have feelings. Maybe you only say them in office hours, good, but is that what we're doing here? Is just saying, yes, a wise sage can have feelings?
Well, thank you, Paul. But I still like among the common. Okay, the essence is not this 4 and the 3. The essence is hate. Okay, does a gentleman hate somebody? Okay, and that's a tough question. Just like if I ask, just like Mark said, he hated the person who asked this kind of question. So so that's a difficult question actually. Kwang, please.
I would like to say that Paul's question, once again, is at the center of Confucianism, okay? Because let's not forget that the lower trigram and the upper trigram is precisely the epistemological concept to make those distinctions. Emotions belong to the animal kingdom, meaning that the sage, the Shengran, the Junzi, is at his foundation an animal. And there's nothing wrong to have this animal component in us because that is the truth. But Confucianism wants, if you want, the animal to have the presence of awareness, meaning that you can hate, you can love, but you can be jealous, you can be envious, you can have all kinds of emotions. And once again, Confucianism is a little bit sexist because all the negative emotions are considered as feminine, and all the noble emotions like loyalty, like friendship, like boldness, because boldness is a positive emotion at the foundation, are considered as masculine emotions. So Confucianism acknowledged the presence of emotion as a component of the lower trigram. And where are those emotions? Those emotions are present in the 3 lines of the lower trigram. At the first line, sense perception, you have the raw, the primitive fear, okay? At the second line, you have a fear that is a little bit more refined, related to the conceptualization, to the imagination of the future. And at the third line, you have more sophisticated emotions like loyalty, like friendship, like love. So emotions are present in the three lines of the lower trigrams, but it's a stuff of the lower trigrams. And when I has been given the classical Chinese education, it has been taught to me in that way, okay, that we are first and foremost emotional people. And those emotions are present in the three lines of the lower trigram. Once again, I'm sorry to repeat that for the second time. In the Chongyong, what has been ordained by heaven is our nature. To lead by our nature is called the Tao. To cultivate the Tao is called the teaching. The Tao is precisely the vertical line. I show it again. The vertical line of the character Wang, meaning king, okay? And that vertical character Wang, king, is precisely what has been ordained by heaven is our nature. So in Confucianism, first we acknowledge that there is a lower trigram, and that lower trigram is made by emotions at different levels of refinement. But the invitation of Confucianism is precisely to cultivate the Tao, and to lead by our nature is called the Tao, and to cultivate the Tao is called the teaching. And that is the development of the upper trigram that is not given by nature, because the lower trigram, the animal dimensions, is given by nature, and the upper trigram is precisely given by education. It can be the Confucianist program, or it can be another program in another culture, for example, the Greek classical education, of course. So I stop here.
All right, thank you, Kwang. Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. I want to echo Paul's question, because it's a question important for me as well. But let me share where I come from, and then and reformulate that question in a narrower sense, specific to the text that we're reading. Other Confucianists, especially younger ones coming after Confucius, did have reference to the moral sentiment. Even 16th century Neo-Confucianism actually developed a separate school that emphasized the moral sentiment, the gemüt, the heart, in precedence to rational thinking about Tao, about the ritual, etc. So clearly that feeling aspect, that appetitive, emotive part of our mind play a role in the future Confucianism. However, for Confucius himself, in the text we are reading, this Analects, is there any reference or heavy reference or isolated reference to the role of emotion rather than the sense of righteousness? Because only towards the end of this chapter, in the very last section, talks about Confucius' idea that if you detest anybody after you are age 40, you're a total loser. Meaning, after age 40, you should love everybody, right? You shouldn't detest anybody. So this is driven heavily by rational thinking of whatever, but without much reference to the sentimentality, the emotion, etc. So my question, narrow question, specific to the text we're reading, any reference to the role played by human emotion in the discussion of morality teaching?
All right, thank you, Nick. I give you a quick answer. If you want to, I will say that no emotion. It's really up to how you read it. But the words right, detest or hate, you can see that's the emotion. If we put strictly on the text, right? Here, the emotion part is only thing is the you dislike, you detest, you hate. Okay, if you want to consider this part is emotion. Okay, that's my answer, but really depend on how you read it. Okay, you mentioned about the last chapter. Make sure we will go there. Okay, so let's move to the next one, which Huang already mentioned. Confucius is sexist. Okay, so misogynist. So let's put it this way.
Okay, so translation by Professor Eno, 17.25. The master said,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the master said, women and small men are difficult to nurture. If you get too close to them, they become uncompliant. And if you stay too distant, they become resentful.
Okay, thank you, Kwang. Okay, Joe, you want to read the Legis? How Legis read it?
Do I want to read it? No. I mean, I will read it just to provide another translation. But the master said, of all people, girls and servants are the most difficult to behave to. If you are familiar with them, they lose their humanity or humility. Anyway, if you maintain a reserve towards them, they are discontented.
Okay, thank you, Joe. That's
slip there. Same thing.
Okay. Chapter 25.
Book 17, chapter 25. The master said, only women and small men are difficult to deal with. They become disobedient when you are too close to them. They start to complain when you keep your distance from them.
All right, thank you. This one is kind of famous. People kind of criticize Confucius. Confucius is sexist or the misogynist. Okay, because he compared the woman and the small man, and then but here I'm not saying. I think during that time, I think everybody is the same, and then he has no reason to support the feminist movement. So he just followed the trend and used women as an example. Okay. I think that is no different than Socrates or whatever, right? So basically, he just used a woman as a familiar phenomenon. So he used a woman as a metaphor to explain the situation as a small man. Okay, so I think that's the way Confucius do. Okay, and Amang, you want to say something about this?
No.
Okay, let's have a brief discussion. Mark and Joe. Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So I'm curious about, there's a couple different translations for the same word there. In one, it was servant, and I think in the others, it was small man. So is small meaning like short and light, or does it mean of low social stature? So that,
Okay.
or does it mean something else?
Yeah, small man here, I think it usually means the opposite of junzi. Okay, so that's a small man. But I will not totally disagree on Legi's translation as a servant, because servant also kind of a small man. But personally, I would say this one he used woman as a metaphor. Okay, as a Confucius use woman as a metaphor, say, oh, small man is like woman, like a woman. Okay, so that's the way he is doing. Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So
Yeah.
I think the significance of this comment to me is quite a bit broader than just the issue of male supremacy, because
Yeah.
it seems like it's kind of adopting a kind of condescending patriarchal approach, not necessarily just about gender, but about class and social status as well. And so I think that women are just rolled into that lower status blanket, but I think that the attitude is kind of towards everyone of lower status. That's my impression.
Yeah, I think so. And today's reader, a lot of people criticize Confucius because you read as you lower the woman to small man, okay? But actually, Confucius' idea is he lowered the small man to the level of woman. So I think that's the situation. So yes, Confucius is sexist, but he is not more sexist than the people during his time. So I think that's the way I want to say. So we have Joe and Kwang. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a couple discussions about the idea of presentism. So the idea that we're pushing our values down on the past. So if you look at it in terms of even, some of the, the Roman or the Greek philosophers, they're unfortunately just ignorant. And so from that perspective, it's okay, it's relative to a certain degree. But if you're talking about this idea of what we've been talking about this evening in terms of this whole idea of if you lose your humility, then you're a small person. This idea that then relates directly back to what we were talking about before. I have knowledge of something, I'm practicing a ritual, but I have no humility. In other words, look how good I can do it. Well, that is a lack of humility, and you don't know why you're doing it in the first place, and you wouldn't necessarily be bragging about it if you would actually, you would be looking at how you relate to everyone else, as opposed to, yeah, you automatically revert back to this lower way of being and lose your humility in the process. Therefore, the relationship is with what you do well is one of ignorance, no matter what. So it's not necessarily just even directly related to the ability to comprehend. It's the ability to actually pursue something that is of meaning. And so from that perspective, it's consistent with what else we've read this evening.
Thank you, Joe. But I think Leakey has a translation as lose your humanity.
They lose, let's see what exactly. If you are familiar with them, they lose their humility. In other words, the fact that it's a lower individual, that their humility is lost, thus they're lower. So in other words, you can have an individual who is knowledgeable, as I was just saying a moment ago, who's very talented, but they lose their humility in that process. Therefore, they're actually something that is of lower stature. So with your translation is what then? They become disobedient.
Yeah, Bushun means disobedient. Okay, and then they translate as uncompliant. I think both are the same because I don't see why Bushun will translate as lose your humanity. Okay, because that probably too much interpretation from Leakey.
They start to complain when
because
you
you talk about the woman or the small man. If you are I think about the situation, right? You think about like some people. If you are become buddy, okay, drink together, and then he start to not respect you, even you are the boss, right? And if you keep the distance from him, he start to dislike you. So he's talking about this kind of person. And
I mean, you don't want to hang out with people that are essentially or you deem to be obnoxious.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, I think that's
I mean, to a certain extent, take out the women referral, then I'm actually, to some degree, yeah, I don't give a damn who, I'd rather be around somebody that I can stand and that actually is doing something worthwhile versus which means it could be anything, versus somebody that's really talented and just obnoxious.
Yeah. So
I know a lot of people like that.
Confucius' message: don't be with this kind of person. Okay, don't be with this guy, because either way, okay, you cause
Pick
the
your
problem.
drinking buddies wisely.
Okay, so that's right. Only drink with you, the 君子, not drink with 小人 or small man. Okay, so I think that's the message. So,
yeah.
Kwang and Kwang, please.
I think that 17.25 is very interesting. It's not the last, but it's the one before the last, the penultimate one of the chapter 17. Let's not forget that chapter 17 starts with Yang Ho, right? Who tried to ask Confucius to work for him and who was not very happy and who acted a little bit like a bully, because Confucius, by his maneuver, showed clearly that he didn't want to work for him. And still, Yang Ho tried to imagine the scene. Okay, Yang Ho, Confucius bumped into him in the road, and he just come clear, close to Confucius to try to, let's say, convince him, but a little bit bully him into accepting to be his officer. So here, we show Yang Ho is a man of high station, socially speaking, but he's someone who is not capable to take a no as an answer, okay, which is a little bit a manifestation of a small man. And here at 17.25, we have small men, but who are of low social stations, okay? Because small man in the moral meaning can happen with upper class people like Yang Ho, or can happen with lower class people like the servants. Because here, Xiao Ren, I would take the Xiao Ren as more servants than people of low moral station. So I would say that it's an excellent way to close the chapter. We start with a lowly person, morally speaking, but with high social station, and we end with lowly people in terms of emotional control, but of lowly social station. I stop here.
All right, thank you, Kwang. Among need to go, so let's quickly read the chapter 20, the last one, so we finish this one, and I will stay here for a few minutes.
Let's do it in reverse order then, so I can read real quick, and then you guys can read other versions, because I do have to run.
26, let's finish it. And I think Nick talked about this. I hope Nick's still here. So, okay, go ahead, Amang.
Book 17, chapter 26. The master said, if a man of 40 years still displays badness, it is the end of him.
The master said, when a man at 40 is the object of dislike, he will always continue what he is.
Okay, I think this one have a many.
Oh, you want to go?
Okay, the master said, if a man reaches the age of 40 and has not earned the hatred of anyone, it is all over with him.
Okay, so it's totally different than what I translate. Okay, so just opposite. Okay, so here that we can open discussing which one is correct, because only thing I can do is I follow the text strictly, and I do get Eno's point, because Eno read 见, okay, because again, Chinese words, the ancient Chinese words very different. This word 见, I read as 现, okay, display, okay. So I read as when you are 40 years old, you still display something bad, okay, that's over. And I think Eno read in a different way, which also right. because if you are 40, okay, 见 means see, being see, okay, and people see, some people dislike you, okay, that means you are mushi, you have tried to be friend, be nice with everybody. That's also the problem. So that's Eno's interpretation. It's hard to say who is right, who is wrong. Of course, before I make the translation, I know Eno translate this way. So I think the way, and I think Zhu Xi translates in this way, I think, but I'm not sure, So okay, let's go ahead to discussion, and then we can discuss chapter 25, 26. And I think Nick is still here. I think Nick probably read the chapter 26 a little bit different. And then that's the end of book 17. So we have I will leave in about 5 minutes. So let me finish. So Joe, you will stay here, right?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay, I put you as a host. So basics that I want to say is we finished book 17. Then we have the 3 books to go, 18, 19, and 20. Forget about 20. 20 is very short, only 3 chapters. Okay, it's totally different, but we will get there. And then 18 is also take a different turn, because book 18 is full of a historical account. Okay, talking about a lot of history story, okay, as a historical example. Okay, that's 18. 19 is, I don't think there's any words from Confucius that must compile all the words after Confucius died. So that's all his disciples, okay, put together what they are talking about. So the disciple become a teacher, okay, during that time. That's book 19. So we are toward to the end, and I just give you some spoil about 18, 19, and 18, 19, and 20. So that's open discussion. Okay, so Joe, I will make you a host.
I'm already a host, so that's cool.
You are co-host.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Joe, you want to start?
I mean, Paul had his hand up, but
Paul, let's use the previous hand. Paul, yeah. Paul, go ahead.
All right.
Okay, here I go. I got it. I was having trouble with my technology. Are we still able to talk about the previous one, or is this we should?
Yeah. Right now you can talk anything. Okay, you can talk about.
I just want to do an interpretation of the previous one that builds on the discussion before that, because it is right after the thing, but it feels like it's about feelings, that he's talking about closeness, and he's talking about emotion.